Hello. Can you hear me at the back? Super, brilliant. Okay, clicker, cool. Right, so basically, following on from John, that's kind of like following on from kind of you too, just very different. Yeah, so basically talking about HTTPS, which in 2017 is kind of like something that I kind of consider essential for every single site, unless you're kind of like a mom and pop blogger, and even then, you kind of have to start considering it. I mean, so basically, the reason you should do HTTPS this year is because basically you should. I'll go on to some more reasons why, but yeah, a bit about me. As mentioned, I'm kind of currently working with Just Eat. I've been there for a couple of years. I've got a few other clients as well, but basically predominantly Just Eat. Just to give you kind of an idea of who Just Eat are, they've done in 2016 136 million orders. And on top of that, you know, they had like about 40% growth in 2016. So I'm pretty happy with how they're doing, and I think they can do way more. So why HTTPS? Well, this is when we went to HTTPS, the blue line. When we did it, things went upwards. So, you know, it wasn't like I'm blaming everything on HTTPS because we were doing lots of things at the same time. So SEO is a good reason to do HTTPS. This isn't to say it's the only reason, but it's a good starter reason. And the other reason to do HTTPS is basically because you want to make sure that your users are seeing exactly the same thing that you're hoping they're going to see. Now, who uses free hotel Wi-Fi? Pretty much everybody in the room, I'm guessing, because I can't see. Yep, everybody in the room. Basically, free hotel Wi-Fi has been found to be inserting adverts into people's web pages in the past. So you go to a website, you think it's totally what you expect. Imagine if the BBC suddenly started advertising, I don't know, Viagra or something like that. You know, what I'm getting at is that you want to know that the page you're looking at is exactly what the user intended it to be. And this basically is why Google are really, really keen on HTTPS. I mean, this is a good example here. Basically, Qantas, you know, they're kind of saying log in, all the rest of it. But up the top there, there's a pointer on this, yes. And it says not secure. You know, it's just going to not make you trust them. You're going to sit there and kind of go, would I really put my data into this site? And rightly so, because as I mentioned before, there's so many ways in which people can intercept it. Troy Hunt is kind of like baiting them here, basically saying, hey, Qantas, it says it's not secure, is something wrong? And, you know, he did get a good answer as well. If you're looking at odd things on the internet and you don't want your ISP to know, it's another reason why HTTPS is important. You don't want to have what you're looking at intercepted by everybody else to give you kind of targeted advertising. And nowadays, the top 10,000 websites, only about 30% of them are now on HTTPS. I'm not saying HTTPS is for everybody. I'm saying if you care about your website, if you'd make money from it, if it's kind of got any value, then yeah, HTTPS is definitely where you should be at. So it's not really just about SEO. I mean, yes, SEO, HTTPS, Google have been talking about it. Google have said it's a ranking boost. I definitely do it for SEO, but the main reason I do it is for trust and security. One of the kind of common comments is that people are saying that, oh, if I put it onto HTTPS, it's slower. And I've heard this time and time again, and it's kind of a true fact. If you just put it on HTTPS, it will actually be slower, but it can actually be faster. Who knows what a PWA is? Anybody? One person, cool. Progressive web apps are something which are really cool and rapidly coming in as being kind of the next generation of the web. You've probably seen it where you browse and a website suddenly says, hey, can we send you notifications? And some of these websites will even work offline, so they cache, they do things. There's so many ways in which these websites are now faster, smoother, and more cool. They can do more, they can access more capabilities in your phone, but most importantly, they run really fast if you get it right. Twitter has now got a PWA. Sadly enough, a lot of this stuff is Android only, but don't worry, it is coming to iPhones eventually, so yeah. But this is the checklist for them, and yeah, You need to have HTTPS for a lot of the functionality for it to work because they're kind of accessing more of your capabilities. So it's definitely worth making sure you're on HTTPS to kind of get access to everything else. And yeah, for AMP, I'm guessing very few people are doing AMP pages. Anybody doing AMP? No, one person, awesome. AMP pages are one of those kind of cool things which is a very bad solution to a very bad problem. Somebody recently said that the average web page now is something like 3 megabytes, which is, you could basically build a computer game in an average web page, Doom. And that kind of is worrying. I mean, why on earth are we kind of putting more and more and more into a web page? Why does it have to be so heavy that Google's turn around and kind of go, well, we'll create this alternative site for you. But there are cool things about AMP. I quite like them, but I think they're a bad solution to a bad problem as opposed to anything else. Justy, we're not doing it. HTTP 2. This is actually what I was talking about before about speeding up your site. To go onto HTTP 2, you absolutely need to be on HTTPS. And the reason why is because speeding up your site isn't a requirement, sorry, HTTPS isn't a requirement for HTTP 2 from their end, but it is in most browsers. So for browsers to support it, they all kind of say, actually, you need HTTPS. So yeah, HTTP 2 is cool because it means that you can push stuff to the browser and also you can multi-thread. That means you can download all of the web page at once instead of kind of going this bit, then this bit, then this bit, then this bit. It's like getting rid of the congestion in a motorway by kind of having way more lanes than ever before. Google knows that without HTTPS, what you're basically sending is not necessarily what they're receiving. So going back to that original point, that Google is kind of conscious that if you're saying that you recommend a certain medicine or a certain health information, a certain very, very important bit of information, you want to make sure that the end user is seeing exactly what was supposed to be said. So, you know, there are cases where phone numbers have been changed, affiliate links have been inserted. There's some great JavaScripts which you can put on your own website to kind of make all of the links across your site affiliate links. This could have been inserted at another point by someone else if you're kind of using their technology. But I'm not going to talk about cybersecurity. Basically today, I'm going to talk about why you should be going over to HTTPS and most importantly, how to do it from an SEO point of view. Sadly, not from a tech point of view because I'm not very good at that part. Yeah, so pages, these is what you get if you kind of mix the content up. There's a few great examples of some bad SSL. I'm going to kind of run through these fairly quickly, but the short version is it looks bad from the user. This is a great example actually where somebody's hacked it in. So you can see the green padlock, but it's actually the favicon. Somebody's just been sneaky with it. But these are kind of the 3 examples of the different types of certificates you can get. This is the advanced one, the enhanced one. This means that you absolutely know who it is. There's a company name in there. This is the standard one. And this is where it's kind of gone a bit messed up. We've all seen the messed up one. Sometimes when you're clicking into a site, the certificate's expired, something just goes a bit wrong. And basically, trying to avoid anything like that, because what happens is people will kind of go straight back to Google and try your competitor. I'll do that. There's no way I'm going to trust a site which Chrome tells me, do not trust this site. The one thing to mention is the fact that just because there's a great padlock on there, it doesn't mean you're going to trust the rest of the site. I mean, we've all seen it. There's been a recent case where Verizon's call data has been uploaded to a public S3 bucket, which means if you knew the URL, you could just download huge amounts of customer data. SSL isn't 100% of a solution to everything. It's just kind of a great first step. And I kind of have this opinion that if the site takes that first step, hopefully they're going to take the subsequent steps. So I'm kind of confident that that first step gives me more confidence that they know what they're doing the rest of the way. Not 100%, because I've seen what happens, but yeah. So Google's recommendations, basically, this is the list that I'm going to go through. This is kind of like a fairly old list. I've tried to find an updated version. But Google's own information is so convoluted, so out of date, and so hard to navigate that I've actually got to the point where I've kind of gone, you know what, I'm almost going to make my own list. I'm going to take their solution and kind of update it, go through it, and kind of keep going. So that's their list. Let's go through. Certification. This is a colleague of mine, great guy, but definitely needs to be certified. The thing is that your certificate has to be good enough. There's great testers out there, there's great checks out there, but basically you need to make sure your certificate is great. 204-bit key, and most importantly, if you don't have it good enough, You won't be certified, you can't take credit card information, you shouldn't be taking personal information. So yeah, get the best key you can. One of the kind of terminologies that we keep using is SSL. SSL is like calling it a biro every time you call it talking about a ballpoint pen. SSL is actually old. It's an old standard that should now be disabled, basically. And the only reason we still call it SSL is because actually it is kind of like the evolution of SSL. It's now called TLS, but TLS TLS is like the next version. It's just that Netscape had the trademark of SSL and it became a bit of an issue. So if you hear people talking about SSL, it's the same thing as TLS, but it shouldn't be SSL actually on your site. So just kind of making sure that you kind of guys get that. One of their recommendations is your URLs should be relative and protocolless rather than straight, starting with HTTP or HTTPS. Now, my view is that actually a lot of the time for a lot of the things that I do, I try to include the protocol because it's often on a third-party site, and actually it's kind of, there are reasons why I do that now, and the main reason is because I am definitely moving everything I do over to the HTTPS, and most of the time, browsers, everything, happier with the full protocol. But this includes your images, this includes your scripts, this includes everything, embeds, Facebook, YouTube. The sheer number of times that I've gone to a site and looked at a page and kind of gone, well, that's weird, something's kind of not missing, it's got a mixed padlock signal. That dropping the green is because a lot of the time there's something hard-coded in there, something hard-coded in the CSS, the JavaScript, somewhere. The other kind of more important thing is don't block HTTPS. Now, I've seen some really odd advice out there about the fact that when you're kind of moving over to HTTPS, you should block it using a robots.txt file. Now, most of the sites that I've been working on, in fact, pretty much all of them, all we've kind of done is made sure that the main site is available using HTTPS, and often it's the same robots.txt file. It's the same kind of, in fact, everything's basically the same across, so don't block HTTPS. Now, some people kind of are worried about duplicate content. Google have kind of said this time and time again. Don't worry about duplicate content when you're going over to HTTPS. It's got your back. It's not a problem. They know what's happening. They can see it. They're kind of clever enough. HSTS is another thing. Basically, whenever you load up a web page, whenever you type in a URL, first of all, it tries the HTTP version. HSTS is a way of kind of telling Google, this is always on HTTPS. Everything is on HTTPS. Move over to it. You're not going to lose anything. And if you get it all right, go down this route. Now, there's actually a list of things to kind of, there's the website URL to kind of say to Google, or Chrome particularly, this page is always on HTTPS. Submit it. It takes a while, and then it kind of comes through. Now, the HSTS is a bit like the CSP, which I'll come on to in a minute. It's a header response, and it just says, all of this site, HTTPS. And that's what I just mentioned. So basically, if you've done it, put your site onto the list, and then Chrome will go straight through to HTTPS. It's a little bit faster. It stops that 301 redirects or round trips, and it just kind of speeds things up on the web. I mentioned in that first list, use Speedy. Speedy is now deprecated. It's now HTTP2, which I've kind of mentioned already. Basically, if you're going to go onto HTTPS, also go onto HTTP2 because you'll be faster normally. So how do you actually migrate over to HTTPS? What is the best way? If you're on HTTP and you're actually moving to HTTPS, this way is my way. This is the way in which I've kind of done it time and time again, and it's never really worked badly yet. The good thing is we created a Trello board, and that's available at that URL. So if you want a copy of it, go to takeitoffline.co.uk/HTTPS. There's a few other bits and pieces on there as well. This Trello board, we've kind of chucked everything on there. Not everything is suitable for everybody. So if you go there, take a copy of it, you'll probably want to delete half the cards because, everybody here use Trello? Yeah. If you don't use Trello, it's free, it's awesome, it just does everything that you could possibly want. It's a project management tool for very small to medium projects. So how to do it is basically a gradual migration. This means starting from the beginning. Once you've got your website up with HTTPS, so you're kind of dual running, then test the certificate. Put the certificate into this tool and make sure it comes out with the best possible grade. I don't know if you can see it down the bottom there, but basically a grade A is awesome, a grade B is okay, grade C you get away with, anything below that, you kind of need to look at kind of following the steps. Now, some of the steps are kind of things that you'll struggle to kind of complete, like S&I and other bits and pieces, because you can't do everything perfectly every time unless you've got serious amounts of money. But getting an A grade, I'm pretty happy with that. Set up Search Console. This is kind of almost a confusion to me. I don't fully get this from Google. Google kind of knows that if you've got the HTTP version, I mean, surely it should be one single account. This is kind of one of those weird things where I kind of go, who would have a HTTP version and someone else would have the HTTPS version? But at the moment, they're two separate properties, two separate sets of data, two separate sets of crawling information. So it's definitely worth making sure that you've got both HTTP and HTTPS set up so you can start to go through it. And it kind of is a very simple step. You just do the same authentication. And yeah, once you've got to that point, run both of them together. So you're not kind of saying, actually, we're just running HTTP and HTTPS straight over to HTTPS. Run them both together. This gives you the ability to check through, make sure your scripts are working, make sure there's nothing that's gone wrong because you're trying to go to HTTPS and you're not getting error messages if people go onto pages. And I recommend doing this part for quite a little while. One of the things that I tend to do as I start kind of doing this is I start tracking who's on HTTP and who's on HTTPS. I saw some odd advice recently which said, you know, create two separate accounts for it. No, the easiest, simplest way is if you're using Google Tag Manager or if you're comfortable with JavaScript, you can create something which says, I want to track the protocol. And it's really, really easy to do. It's part of the URL. If you need help with that, just give me a shout. I'll kind of drop you a tweet, step-by-step guide. So easy. I set it up as a content group. You can do it however you want to. And this means that I can see in a very simple dashboard how much of the organic traffic is going to which version. And it's simple. The other thing to do at this point is fetch, render, and repeat. As I mentioned before, you shouldn't be blocking anything from Google. This includes assets, fonts, this includes all the scripts. I fetch and render every single template, every single page I can find that Google should be seeing as a landing page. And I do it time and time again, both on the desktop, the mobile. Yep, that's it. And I do it over and over and over. And the reason why is because it's surprising how often I discover that a script's not available here or something's kind of gone slightly askew here. And if I do it time and time again, then I know, I'm confident that everything is going to work when we move over. Again, going with the reporting, there's a guy called Scott Helm who has created an awesome tool which allows you to track using a CSP, which is a header push, which pages have got mixed content in. So which pages aren't returning the green bit because of the fact that you've got like, you know, a font or a script or something like that in there. I'll come on to some examples in a minute, but basically it's amazing how many big companies are making some really stupid mistakes. This is what a CSP is, and what it allows you to do is say which scripts, where they're from, are allowed onto the page. So you can say, I only want analytics, I only want HTTPS. I'm allowing everything, but I want to report on this. And this CSP, which is kind of complex, but basically there's a great builder at Scott Helm's website that allows you to build it up. And you can say which websites are allowed to come through. Now, the biggest problem with this, and I've seen this a couple of times, is the fact that people look through the site, they find everything they think they should do, and they forget that GTM is pulling a script in here, or a script over there is pulling another script in from a different domain. So something kind of goes a bit Pete-Tong on it. And so basically, with the CSP, it's something you have to be very, very careful with, but absolutely recommend it, at least just to get the HTTPS part of it 100%. I also set up the site in SEMrush. I find SEMrush one of the most simplest tools to kind of push things through to. There are other sites as well. I mean, I've mentioned Screaming Frog. I've mentioned we use Deep Crawl. We use something else called Content King, which allows us to kind of scrape the sites and pull it in. So there's so many different tools which do the kind of similar thing, but my current favorite is SEMrush for this particular purpose. It has a load of extra sort of nice features within it. So once you get to the point where you've kind of gone through and you're ready and you're tested and you're happy, you've gone through all the mixed error messages, you've made sure all the internal linkings pointed to the HTTPS version, make sure that everything is, you're comfortable with every part of it. You've scraped it, you've done it, you've checked every single box and you're ready to go over, then yeah, it's time to go over. You change the canonical tags. Before, most people have got canonical tags on the websites, making sure they're pushed at the original version. Now, move them over to the HTTPS version. When we moved over with Just Eat last year to HTTPS, we didn't do redirects, we didn't do anything like that initially. We just changed the canonical tags, and in 3 days, the 20,000 odd pages that were indexed on Just Eat literally flipped over. It just took about 3 days. We saw Google kind of spike up the crawling. We saw it coming in. We saw everything happen like that. And yeah, we absolutely got all of the traffic moving over to HTTPS from organic in days. It was fantastic. So once we'd done that, we were very happy. And then we started putting in redirects. Now, Google says you don't actually need to put in 301 redirects. You can put in 302. You can even put in JavaScript redirects. But Google's not the only search engine, and there's other reasons, there's other benefits of using a 301. Browser caching will kind of automatically push you through. So basically use a 301, not because Google says you should, but because it's best practice. And as I mentioned before, HSTS, this is one of those steps where when you do this, it's almost no going back, because what happens is if you start doing this and you want to reverse back, it becomes very, very challenging. So this is almost the last step possible. So once you've done it, once you're happy, I'm going to talk through some quick ways in which common sites have lost that green tick. What have they done that's kind of screwed up? The best example is Apple. I love this one. Basically, Apple iTunes, they invest millions on everything they do, but they can't get some basics just right. But guessing most of you guys have got an iPhone, you've got apps installed, you go to the iPhone App Store. None of it's secure. It's a bit weird, and all of the reason why is the fact that, I'm using O2 Priority Moments as an example, but basically, they've got an image in here, this one, big, full screen, massive image, and interestingly, it's loaded from a certificate, from a CDN, and the certificate's saying it's from a different website, and it's that kind of like, what, why, how can you, this is simple, why can't you just, I don't understand why, hasn't somebody said to you, could just sort this out? It's the sort of thing where, if I was at Apple, I'd be turning around and kind of going, please, just sort this one tiny thing out. It's really simple. It's a CDN. It's not like it's a complicated, big problem or something like that, which is why I love this image, because it's kind of like a bit of a what, why, what on earth is going on. Most important thing that most people want to know about is the toolbox. What are the tools that people use? I've already mentioned SEMrush, I've mentioned Screaming Frog before, but what is the toolbox that people use to make sure that you're on HTTPS? What is it that you need to kind of use? So, Chrome. Chrome is now one of the most amazing toolkits for SEO ever. It's brilliant. Basically, what I found is that Chrome has become the single most used tool. Well, if you didn't have Chrome or an Internet Explorer, a browser, you couldn't actually browse the website to start with, but there's so much going on hidden away in here. You can see performance, you can see everything. But one of the things that I recommend doing is, if you're an SEO guy or if you're a digital marketer, when you're browsing, open up the console, which is Control-Shift-I on a Windows machine, I don't know what it is on a Mac, sorry, and just leave that sort of hidden on a side screen, and you'll see loads of messages popping up as you're browsing around. Often these are kind of like little error messages, like the cookie here isn't working, or this isn't working, but the great one is the fact you'll see the mixed content warnings, and these will kind of pop up all the time, and you can kind of go, oh, that's interesting, and it tells you why it's popping up, where it's come from, what's actually happening. And so basically, absolutely, Chrome is my favorite SEO tool at the moment. House of Fraser recently went over to HTTPS, and again, you can see here it says that, was loaded over secure content, but the form endpoint, so basically it's asking for email address. That email goes through, and instead of passing it through to HTTP, it's passing it to HTTP. Instead of it passing it through to HTTPS, it's passing it through to HTTP. It's such an easy single character fix. It's just frustrating that they haven't done it. And because I'm kind of nosy, I actually checked, and it would work fine if they made that extra character in there. So, their entire site, moving over to HTTPS, but it hasn't got that nice, secure green tick that makes you all trust it, that makes you kind of go, this is a nice, safe, secure site. Why? Why? Yeah. The other thing to do is, when you're using the Chrome again, is that you will be able to kind of see this kind of like waterfall type thing. And they hide some columns in this waterfall thing. And it's one of those things where when somebody showed me, I was like, what? because it's just so simple. The things that they hide is the protocol and the, so the protocol, which is, and when it says there, H2, that means HTTP2. So suddenly you can find that you might discover that all of your main pages are loading on HTTP2, but your images, your CDN, is still on HTTP 1.1. You can kind of go through and discover what's going on. This is BBC, and so you can see, they've got it on HTTPS, but everything's being loaded from HTTP 1. So it's kind of slowing things down slightly because it is kind of saying, you know what, all these cars can go down the fast lane, but these ones have to go down the slow lane. HTTP2 is significantly faster, and it's now all browsers pretty much. Anybody who's using an old version of Internet Explorer, it's not going to speed things up for you, but bad luck. And the other thing it has is a kind of a security area, so you can investigate even more. You can look into the certificates, you can look into how valid it is, what it's saying to you, and this gives you some insight, and so it tells you exactly what's going on. You can kind of do your certain self-audits. That thing I mentioned before, which gives you the grading from A to E, I've never got an E, but it kind of gives you the same insights here. You can start to investigate things. So Chrome is starting to give you all of this extra information straight out of the box. There's something else which I haven't managed to include in this presentation called Lightbox, and that gives you sort of even more advanced information. The problem is it kind of gets so overcomplicated that I sit there frowning at a lot of it and not really using it. But yeah, so mentioned before, another tool that I love is SEMrush. SEMrush is really quite cheap, and for what it does, I think it's phenomenally good, and it gives you this extra information. Screaming Frog. Screaming Frog now gives you an export of all of the pages you've got mixed content. Now, historically, it wouldn't export all the information that was maybe in a JavaScript or somewhere hidden in a linked file, but I think they're definitely working on it, and I think the next version, or the new version that's just been released, includes all this. So, again, Screaming Frog allows you to render pages and pull it out. There's Sitebob as well, which is kind of working on this sort of thing as well. And the other thing is log file analysis. Now, log file analysis is something which, I have to be honest, I haven't done in a while, but it's something that every SEO consultant recommends. It allows you to see what Google's really doing, what on earth it's spending its time looking at. It'll show you some really odd things like the orphan files that Google's discovered and the pages that you thought were not ever going to be cached or indexed, and Google's kind of found its way into it. So log file analysis is definitely worth a bit of time and investment. And again, Screaming Frog has brought out, it's a tool for kind of analyzing it. But what was interesting was that Dawn, who's one of the organizers of SASCON, she kind of noticed that all of her pages, all of the information in the log file was dropping out. And it turned out that there had been an export, but it was of the HTTP instead of the HTTPS logs. And so she kind of found that the information she was receiving was a bit wrong. I mean, this is kind of better explained in the thread, but yeah, basically she kind of was having a bit of a nightmare. And it turned out that was what the problem was. So if you're doing log file analysis, make sure you're viewing the HTTPS, the HTTP, everything that you should be. And the other thing that I thought I'd mention is GDPR. Now, who's heard of GDPR? 4. Okay, now GDPR is one of those things that's terrifying a lot of businesses. The reason why is that it's going to hit hard. It's the Data Protection Act, but much more advanced. Now, as I mentioned before, there's been so many security breaches. There's been so many kind of issues. Now, suddenly, you are responsible for the security of your website. Now, that should go without saying, but over the past few years, it's been a very soft kind of approach. If you got hacked, fix it, yeah. Now it's very much a case of secure the hell out of your site. I kind of, when I kind of talked about it internally, I kind of attributed it to being the motherfucking pterodactyl, which is the best song ever. And yeah, but there's basically 1 year and 10 months to go. If you're not already working to kind of plan for it and you're in a big business and you've got lots of personal data, start planning now. So a few kind of quick final thoughts. Basically, add the renewal of the certificate to a calendar. I mean, again, it's surprising how often I've kind of spoken to companies and it's like, well, you know that the certificate's running out in a week or two. Have you got it planned in? No. And these things can sometimes run out, they can expire, they can change, and nobody is seemingly on top of it. The guy that set it up has left the business, he left 2 years ago, and suddenly it kind of feels like, well, you should be on top of this is going to screw your business. But we've all been to websites where the certificate's invalid. if you do change your URL, which every business seems to want to do far too often, make sure you've got the certificate for the old site for at least a year or so. And again, the reason why is that people might mistype it. If it's previously on HTTPS, it'll go a bit wrong. So basically, make sure you've got the old certificates for a year. They're not that expensive if it's big business. It's not something which you have to spend millions on. You can get the most budget solution in place just for redirects. Again, you need to have the Google Search Console for the new site and the old site. But what you don't need to do is use the change of address feature. I saw some advice a while back which said you need to use a change of address when you change the URLs. For a HTTPS migration, you don't need to do that. Google just sees it. It's all fine. And then finally, you can migrate in sections, which means that you don't have to do it all at once. So, you know, if you want to do your main site but not the blog, or the blog but not your main site, so often you can find that, you know, doing a section of the site is fine. The only downside to doing this is if you use relative URLs, you'll find that people are being pushed into pages which have got error messages and other bits and pieces. So be careful if you do it in sections, but it's absolutely fine to do it. Oh, and one thing, your MozDA, it seems like DA seems to be attributed to HTTP and HTTPS separately. If you're using MozDA as a KPI, don't. It's not a great KPI. Look at search visibility, use Systrix or SEMrush or Google Analytics traffic, anything. But MozDA is not a great metric. So yeah, summary, HTTPS for security, but get it right for SEO. You can migrate to HTTPS to take advantage of everything like PWAs, the extra information you get in Google Analytics, which I didn't mention before. Do it step by step. Don't try and kind of go tomorrow we're on HTTPS for everything. Kind of do it in stages. Make sure you've got the certificate. Make sure your files are available. Make sure your CDN has got the right certificate in place. Make sure that all of those little steps are there before you push your users over there. When you're browsing, leave that Chrome console open. I mean, it's such invaluable marketing information, and the amount of times where I kind of go, hey, this is odd, and it's impacting PPC tracking, or it's doing this, or it's pulling in something which is kind of screaming out at me, this is a quick and easy fix. I'm often surprised by how often I kind of go, wait, the favicons not calling a 404 over here. And little bits and pieces where I kind of go, you know what, this is a 10-minute fix for that team over there. They should have noticed it, but track it. Use the content security policy or Google Tag Manager. And that's it, really, yeah. So there's loads more resources at that URL that I mentioned before. takeitoffline.co.uk/HTTPS. We've got documents and the Trello board. And that's it, really. So, cool. How did I do for time? Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Gerry. Has anyone got any questions for Gerry? One over there? We've got Mike coming to you quickly, as quick as Joe can run.
The Let's Encrypt certificate, so you were saying before that
Yep.
certificates have different qualities.
Yes.
The free ones that are given out on that, are they likely to be okay or not really?
Okay, yeah, great question. The short answer is that Google themselves are kind of recommending Let's Encrypt for PWAs and other bits and pieces. It kind of depends on what you want to use it for. Now, I don't fully understand this part, so bear with me, but basically, the better the quality certificate, for some reason, it's faster from kind of like Google console, so Chrome basically calling it and other bits and pieces. There is actually a speed implication of better quality certificates, and there's also a trust implication. Basically, if at some point Google decides not to trust the budget ones over here, and it starts to put up a red flag in Google Chrome, then there is implications there. But for a lot of things, you know, we've been using on Take It Offline, we use I think it's Let's Encrypt. Had no issues, had no problems at all. And so, yeah, there's no actual problem with Let's Encrypt. There are some others that are cheap, free, self-signed, other bits and pieces, and they are not as recommended because you will find that some of them just don't trust them. The best thing to do is if you take a look at this, another site which has got the certificate that you want on it, run it in that tool that I mentioned before, which is the SSL certificate tool. And have a look at what they say about it, and then basically make sure load it up in Chrome, load it up in Firefox as well, just to kind of see what Firefox are, because they are not quite as trusting with some certificates as others.
Any more questions?
That's good.
Okay,
One at the front.
One more at the front, quickly.
Do you want to shout?
You can probably shout from there.
Oh,
How come you decided to change canonicals rather than apply the 301 redirect straight away?
Good question. To be honest, changing the canonicals was easier. And it was a bit of a, if we change them, we can change them back again. And we can, if somebody drops into it and they're not redirected, they're not forced into HTTPS. It's kind of it will kind of still work and everything. And it allowed, and a 301, the problem with 301s is almost immediately Google will come along and say, actually, this is over here now, and it will kind of not check the old version or something like that. Canonicals are kind of slightly easier to roll back with. You just reverse them. So it was almost like we'll test, we'll keep testing, we'll send some of the traffic, and so it's kind of like a gradual test process and everything. But yeah, as I say, I mean, I tried to do it within like weeks, basically. So from the canonicals to the 301s, I kind of wanted to do that within like weeks, not months or years and things like that. So it was almost like as soon as we can do it, as soon as we've kind of checked it, I mean, as I say, we were checking everything day in, day out almost. And, we didn't find any problems with that site, but some of the other sites, we've got a CMS system, which some people have hacked loads and loads of crap into. And it was amazing where we kind of went, oh, God, this is going to take like forever. But yeah, it just kind of gave us that sort of, what's the word for it, bandwidth to kind of test some more.